Welcome to the Tales to Inspire podcast. Before we get started on this episode, I would like to invite you to our community so that you can hear more stories to inspire change within your life and positive change within the systems in which we live. All I want you to do is to click on the subscribe button. Your comments mean the world to us with anything that's resonated with you, and I absolutely love your support. I can't wait to go on this journey alongside you. Thank you so much for subscribing. Let's get into today's episode.
Hi, I'm Meg Holloway, and this is my tale to inspire.
So, who are you, where are you from, and where did this all begin?
So I'm Meg, and I am a life coach. So I own a company called The Joy Project, and I'm based now in the Lake District, but have lived all over the UK for lots of different reasons. And my mission, if you like, in life is to help overthinkers and self-doubters basically master their mind. And I always say to people, learn the stuff that in my opinion, we should have been taught at school over a few other things.
So going into the very early days of childhood, what kind of family were you born into? Mm-hmm. What were your dreams as a child? Mm-hmm. Like what kind of things were happening at that young age? Yeah,
so I was actually born in the Northeast. I'm 32 now, so it was over 30 years ago now. So I was born in the Northeast. I'm the eldest of three. I moved to the Midlands actually when I was 4. My parents divorced, and moved with my mum and my sister at the time, and my dad, my stepdad, if you like. So I spent a lot of my childhood growing up in Birmingham, Tamworth, Staffordshire, so in the Midlands basically. And I had a really nice childhood. Obviously I had like all the dance and stuff like that going on, and I was a bit of probably like an emo, like a bit of a skater girl. But what I always knew that there was nothing wrong with where I lived, but I always knew that once I left, I was never going to go back. Always like a bit of a dreamer, daydreamer. I did all right at school, but you know, if you probably looked back at my school reports, it was like if she'd only apply herself a bit more and stop talking and stop staring out the window and stop asking annoying questions. It was that kind of thing. But yeah, that was, you know, I always wanted to be a dancer, dance teacher, and then I had my injury, which was around like sixth form time. And I was like, okay, well, I definitely want to go to uni. I had played with the idea of doing some traveling, like, you know, having my gap year, at which point my parents had said, no, because you probably won't come back. And they were probably very right. So I really quickly settled on journalism. My mum had always wanted to do journalism, and she was like a really good writer, and I enjoyed media and people. That's all I could connect was, it'd be great to just talk to people. So I moved to Sheffield in 2009 and did journalism for 3 years. I absolutely loved my degree, like really, really enjoyed it. Simply because I was meeting people and just finding out all these interesting things and learning about documentary making and all this stuff. And I loved Sheffield as well as a city. I just, you know, I've got a soft spot for it. And I was really kind of like, I guess finding myself a little bit. If you ask my parents, they'll say I got very argumentative and maybe like a bit of a know-it-all, which I think happens to uni students. You kind of like blow yourself up a little bit. But, you know, I made friends for life. I got to live with the same 5 girls for 3 years, and like we're still friends over like a decade on. And I just had a really, really good time, and kind of got to be who I wanted to be, got to go, you know, dress just in stuff that I found in vintage shops and express myself and all these kind of things. And then I graduated, and when I graduated, I interestingly knew that I didn't want to be a journalist, and the only way I could explain it was in my head I wasn't cut out for it because I had incredible lecturers and stuff, but it just seemed so cutthroat, and I kind of thought, oh, no, I'm quite empathetic towards people. So, learning about, sometimes you're going to have to go do, I think they call them like, death knocks, where you want to basically go find out about, something not very nice from a family. And I was just like, oh, no, that's not me at all. But in my final year, I'd really got into my snow sports club at uni. And there were companies that take these clubs on holiday. And I'd kind of got into working with them a little bit. And literally when I graduated, they offered me a job as like a ski sales rep, I think it was called. And it meant immediately moving to Manchester, which just felt like this big adventure. And we were told that over the summer, we would be working at festivals and just be having the most fun. And it ended up being one of the hardest years of my entire life. We got paid absolute pittance. We weren't treated very well. I learned very quickly that I'm not very good at sales. And very quickly, I actually got moved to manage the ski reps instead, because it was basically they said, you've got quite a good rapport, so we'd like you to manage the ski reps. So I did that. And although it was one of the hardest years, I learned loads about events, and I suddenly had this real thing about working in the event industry, which for some reason it just like clicked with my brain. It was like, crisis management and all this, organisation and all this different stuff. I'm going to mention it. I was actually called Clipboard Kid at uni because I've always been quite organised.
It's a good trait.
So yeah.
Don't worry, I wish I had that trait.
Literally.
Give me a clipboard, please, and teach me.
Like organising other people, I don't know about myself. But anyway, so then went into the event industry. I did that for a few years. During that time, I moved to South Wales to live with a partner at the time. So I was like 23. Moved down to South Wales. I'd done a little bit of travelling with my friend. I'd basically quit the event job to go do some travelling. And then around this time, met my ex-partner and kind of cut my travelling short so that I could be with him. And then moved to South Wales, which was where he was from. And literally 23, I don't think I'd ever been to South Wales before. And it was like, okay, go build your life down there. And I ended up being down there for 8 years. I pretty much spent my entire 20s down there. And I did a few different jobs. I worked in like internal communications for a lot of that, which was like helping with like employee experience and all these kind of things. So my whole 20s, I was realizing that anything I did, it was always about people. There was always like people involved in it, which I was really good at. It was just my own life that was like a little bit of a mess. And then, fast forward to 27, 28, this particular relationship really, really broke down. I was just super, super struggling. And there was a period of time where I actually didn't have anywhere to live. And I don't know why I'm like, I've got to share this, but I do have to share this because it's one of the most pivotal moments in my life. I found myself pretty much with like 3 weeks to find somewhere to live. And I still had my job, had a really good job and stuff, but just, I had a bit of a housing issue. And I went on spareroom.com, as you do, and came across this girl who was looking for a housemate. So went and met her, went with my Starbucks, and I'll never forget pulling up outside a house, and she like waved and went in, and she brought her uncle round so that she wasn't on her own when she was meeting people, and her uncle kind of just sat in the kitchen while we were chatting. And we stood and talked. I'd never met this girl before. We stood and talked for 2 hours until her uncle finally said, do you want to show Meg the room? And she was like, oh my God, yeah. And I was like, oh gosh, yeah. So when I looked at the room, I was like, yeah, room's fine. And anyway, so I ended up moving in with her, and we lived together for 5 months, and then the pandemic happened. And I know people like moved in with partners during the pandemic or moved back in with families and stuff, but imagine doing it with basically a complete stranger. And it's a good ending to the story because she's now one of my best friends in the entire world. And COVID, I know it broke some people's like living situations. It like made ours. But that time during the pandemic also did is, and I'm sure it did for a lot of people, it gave me this like pause opportunity to kind of go, you know, it was coming towards the end of my 20s and I was like, ooh, I really haven't done a lot of what I kind of envisioned I would have done. I'm renting this room off this girl that I met like a year ago. I've got a good job, but it's not, something's not quite clicking. I just started dancing again, but it didn't feel like enough. I wasn't dating healthily at all. And I hadn't really done a lot of the traveling and stuff that I thought. And I also, if you'd asked me when I was 15, where are you going to be by 30? I was going to be married with kids, like obviously. So I was like, oh, what's going on? So I ended up, I got a house actually in South Wales, which was a bit of an impulse.
You bought a house?
I bought a house.
Okay.
In the middle of the pandemic. This all became very clear why I did this later, but yeah, bought a house. I didn't just buy a house, I bought a house that massively needed renovating because I decided that everybody had like a project during the pandemic, right? And I didn't. So I was like, I'm gonna renovate a house.
I'm so glad that I didn't have that urge.
Do I know anything about renovation or DIY? No, nothing. Anyways, moved into this house and I bought it and then we went into that like final miserable lockdown. And it was really kind of, I was like, what am I doing? And that really led me to realise that the job I had at the time was a really, really good job. And I was learning a lot. I had an incredible boss, like one of the best bosses I've ever had, but it wasn't working for me at all. And my confidence was really, really getting knocked there. So as I probably do a lot in life, I was like, right, next thing that needs to change is my job. And I was really drawn, I'm going to say, to agency life. I'd never worked for an agency before. And I remember I had applied for this job. It was a communications agency. It was going to be a completely remote role, like, you know, the mecca of jobs, completely remote. And I got it. Really tough interview process, but I got it. And I was going to be joining and helping them basically help other companies to improve their employee experience. So I was like, this is great. I'm going to get to see all these different companies and this is going to be an amazing experience. And it didn't go the way I thought it was going to. And the reason being that I soon found remote work terribly lonely, but agency, if you've ever worked for an agency, it came down to the crux of you have to complete timesheets when you work for an agency. And I was suddenly realising that I spent a lot of my time when I was supposed to be like, you know, working hours, just like thinking and sometimes something that they would say, okay, you've got like 4 hours on your timesheet to complete this task would take me like 10 minutes. But then there was also the flip of that. They'd give me a task where they were like, okay, that should take you about 30 minutes. And it would take me weeks, like literally weeks, or I'd just avoid it altogether and what have you. And it was a great agency, but just something wasn't gelling. And that kind of took me towards the end of 2021. And I was getting, you know, all this really great encouragement of like, you've just got all these ideas and you're so, you know, the clients always have really great feedback about you and you're so personable and all this kind of stuff. But I also felt almost like removed from people. And I was like, my whole career so far has been about working with people, and I now feel almost once removed from them because that their client, their agency, you know, you hand over the work to them and then they go deliver it. They go almost create the impact with employees. And I was like, oh, that's what I actually enjoyed. So it's kind of good because it made me realize like really where my strengths lay. But this timesheet thing and our working hours and all this kind of stuff, it was just mind-boggling to me. And it really made me reflect on jobs that I'd had before where, you know, you have events, you're just constantly running around and, you know, you never really have this much downtime. And the admin part of it is oh, you've got like 10 minutes to get it done. So it's like a challenge and blah, blah, blah. And I remember visiting my sister, and this was like, towards the end of 2021, I remember visiting my sister, and I was getting ready to like go out. I was going to like somebody's engagement party from her house, and she was like, oh, I'll curl your hair for you. And we're sat chatting, and she's married with kids now, and we're just catching up and stuff. And she asked me how work was going, because I imagine I probably had a facade that it was all great. And I was like, yeah, not great. And my sister could always tell when something was wrong. And she was like, why, what's wrong? And I burst out crying and just went, the timesheets. And she was like, what? So I explained to her what a timesheet was. And she was like, I don't get it. Like, what's so hard about that? And I was like, I can't do it. I can't do it. I was like, I get to the end of the week and I've got to say what I've done for 5 days, and I can't do it. And she was like, do you not just do it every day? And I was like, nope, that doesn't work either. My brain doesn't want to. And I'm going on and on and on and on. And then my sister said to me something that I'd actually been looking into for about a year of, do you think you have ADHD? And that made me cry even harder, because I'd been wrestling with this maybe my mind works differently thing for about 12 months. And then I've got somebody else stood in front of me basically telling me what I thought I already knew. So start of last year, I started going through the diagnosis and everything. I told nobody, didn't even tell my sister. I just kind of brushed it under the carpet. And I ended up being diagnosed with ADHD. In fact, the psychiatrist literally laughed and went, how have you been living? Like, how have you not been diagnosed with this earlier? And I just threw myself into learning everything I could. And I remember seeing this post on LinkedIn about ADHD. People with ADHD do really well self-employed. They're really good entrepreneurs. They're really good business owners. And I'd secretly always wanted to work for myself. I'd always wanted to like freelance in events. I never really wanted to work for one company. I always wanted to maybe be like an internal comms consultant or something. I just had this urge to work for myself. And I had the side hustle with like my dance instruction and stuff like that, but I knew logically that I'd struggle to make that a full-time job. And I was sat with all this information, and I was just like, I don't know what it is that I want to do. Like, I really don't know. I know now, I'm starting to learn how my brain works. I've done all these different jobs. As far as I was aware, it's not good to be a job hopper. Like, at the time, it was not a good thing. So what the hell am I going to do? And I, as you do, was doom scrolling through Instagram. And this profile came up of this woman, and she was amazing. Just her social media, just remember a grid just like shining. And she was like really like cool surfer chick. She lived down in Cornwall, a little bit older than me, but like not that much. She'd done dancing, she'd been a teacher, all these different stuff. And I just remember being just like, oh, okay, you're not that far ahead of me. And what you're doing seems really attainable, but I don't know how you've done it. So I did the scary thing, which I've never really done before. And I just messaged her and said, I'm thinking about now what she must have thought. She's this random stranger. I just messaged her and said, hi, like longer terms, but basically, how do I have your life? And she was brilliant. And she was like, babes, let's jump on a Zoom call. Let's have a little chat. I was like, oh, it's going to be like MLM. It's going to be like affiliate marketing or something like that, isn't it? Anyways, had a chat with her, and she was like, I'm a life coach. And I'd been coached at work, and my favourite boss that I'd ever had, she was a coach, and she used to do a lot of coaching with me and my colleague. So I'd kind of heard about work coaching and career coaching and stuff, but I never thought of like, oh, you could be a coach just for life in general. And in my head, a life coach was some 90-year-old wrinkly woman with loads of beads who had literally seen the world, right? Just was really wise and just had all this experience. And I'm 30, nearly 31.
No wrinkles that I can see.
Thanks. But I was literally like, who do I think I am? Like, life coaching, come on. Anyways, had this conversation with her, and she told me about the course that she'd done, and how it was important to get accredited because anybody could call themselves a coach, and I've always been a bit of a sensible Sally, so I was like, oh no, I need to have like a qualification. So then she referred me on to a wonderful woman who ran my coaching course, and 6 months later I was selling said renovation house, which was just a nightmare experience. But because of the pandemic, I made a lot of money out of it, and I remember thinking, I'm never ever going to have this money again to spend on myself. What better way than spending it on a training course? So I booked myself on a 12-month coaching course. I did it alongside my full-time job, whilst learning about the ADHD, whilst moving out of South Wales and moving myself up to the Lake District. But it was the first time in my life where everything was starting to move and flow, and it all felt right. Even if I didn't quite know where the pieces settled, I was like, yeah, this is good. Everything's telling me this is right. And then because I've always been a hyper achiever, I started the Joy Project 6 months into the coaching course. And I was like, I'm just gonna see what happens. With the plan that I would eventually quit my full-time job in December 2023. And I actually quit March 2023. Wow. And we're now in we're in September, so October. So yeah, and one of the scariest things I've ever done is stopping being an employee and becoming a business owner. I was absolutely terrified, but every part of my being was like, no, this is what you're supposed to do. You've always worked with people. How much closer can you get than one-on-one groups, like, whatever it was, whatever I was trying. And that original woman that I went to and said, how do I get your life? Eventually became like my mentor. And I remember her saying, in your first year of business, she was like, just experiment. She was like, just do me a favor. She was like, just try lots of different things. And that's what I've been doing. And so far, touch wood, going all right.
So explain to me the Joy Project. What is the entirety of the Joy Project? Yeah,
so the reason I didn't name it after myself, because I've got friends who are like, name coach. I wanted it to be like a community. So yes, I have one-to-one clients, I do workshops, programs, all this different stuff. But to me, I called it the Joy Project because in my head, life is just one big joy project, right? It's one big project from the minute you're born to the minute you die. Nobody ever knows 100%, right or wrong, what they're doing, risk-taking, not risk-taking. But what we're all doing throughout this life project is trying to find joy, right? I played with the happiness project, but happiness to me can be quite fleeting, and it usually comes from doing certain things and whatever. The idea of joy to me was, even in the darkest periods of our life, you can still find some joy in just being alive and like breathing. And the idea behind, it specifically being for like overthinkers and self-doubters was because what I've now kind of proven with my clients is that the one thing that holds us back from running a successful joy project is us. And there are some really straightforward things that we must learn about ourselves in order to unlock. And they always talk about like unlock your potential and full potential, and I actually think your potential is kind of endless if you want it to be. But life coaching and the Joy Project, I don't care if you want to get a promotion, if you want to, work on your relationship, or if you just want to get through the next couple of months. There are things that, and I always say this, the things that we should have been taught at school over Pythagoras theorem, and I wasn't very good at maths, which is why I always go for maths. But there are things we could have been taught at school that would just completely change the way we view our 20s and our 30s, and it's not for everybody. My 20s were really shit. Really struggled in my 20s. And I know there's a lot of people that are the same as me, so I work with them to be like, right, 30s, 40s is going to be different. Or I work with people in their 20s going through it now, and I'm like, right, don't take 5 years like I did to change the game. Like, change it now, yeah. One of my group programs is running at the moment, and part of one of the modules is literally, if not now, when? And that's something that I have to remind myself of as well, not just my clients.
That's the hard thing, right? That you're always doing this thing that essentially you've got to be self-accountable as well. We have at Tales from Inspire, we have a phrase that is always like, the most important person is the person in the mirror. Mm-hmm. It's also the one that I can never change. It's the hardest one. I can change all of your problems, but like sitting with myself is like, man, no, that's not what I want to do.
Well, I did an email to like my email list earlier in the week actually, and I was basically, it was like a reflection piece on my last session with my own coach that I had last week, and I literally put in it like, I know what you're thinking. Why have I got a coach? Like, I'm a life coach. Why would I have a life coach? And I put it because I actually thought, oh yeah, why have I got a coach with all of this knowledge? Like, why do I have a life coach? And then I thought, okay, surgeons don't perform operations on themselves. I don't even think hairdressers cut their own hair. Lecturers don't, they study off other people. If you think about any kind of job or vocation or whatever it is, there's something about working with other people that kind of like draws out things that you might not realize is going on. But to your point, I mean, I work with a lot of people pleasers. I work with a lot of people that for them, they've been running on this belief that if they can just, I don't know, sort out their partner or get their mum to see things differently or work on their friendship group, that then their life will be better, forgetting that it's like, actually, that no, you've got a responsibility to change, improve, explore things yourself. So yeah, we, I don't know. Then again, if you think about us as kids, we're taught to be kind and not selfish and do for others and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of ingrained in us. Like, don't you dare think about yourself, and then here I am like, I really need you to think about yourself.
There's a concept in Nichiren Buddhism. So I practice Nichiren Buddhism. And one of those concepts is called Esho Funi. Right. And Esho Funi is the oneness of self and environment. And the issue is that going back in time from Shakyamuni Buddha's time, 2,500 years ago, is people have always tried to change their environment first before changing themselves. But Esho Funi is the beautiful thing, that if you change yourself, your environment will automatically change. Yeah. So instead of trying to change the parent and the family member or whatever it may be, the environment, change yourself and everything else in your environment will start to change automatically because you're one. Yeah. You're not two. Yeah. You're essentially one entity. And it's really, really interesting. It goes a lot deeper, but what you're saying just agrees completely with that concept, essentially. Yeah,
and I can think of two examples of that. Of my job, I've always changed the job because I thought it was the company, the boss, the environment, right? And actually, until I realised I had ADHD and my mind just worked completely differently, it then occurred to me, like, no, you're going to have to do some changing, whether it's working for another company and asking for adjustments, or like I ended up doing, becoming self-employed. I had to understand how my mind worked before I could expect anybody else to. And then the other example was, I get asked a lot, I've lived in the Lake District for nearly 18 months now, and it's beautiful, it's a wonderful base, and it's somewhere that I've kind of basically grown up going backwards and forwards to the Lake District. So now a lot of people are like, oh, do you wish you'd moved earlier? And I moved when I was supposed to. You know, I can look at the last few years of living in Wales, and I made an incredible friend out of it. Okay, I really, really didn't like where we lived at all, but I wouldn't have met her if I had chosen to just get out of Dodge, basically. And I remember doing the move and telling people, and they were like, that's 6 hours away. You're moving 6 hours away. And it didn't feel like that to me. It was like, well, I'm just moving to where I'm supposed to go to. There was, for somebody who can be quite anxious, there was zero anxiety. It was just what I was supposed to do. And I do believe it was because I'd already started the course. I'd already started learning loads about myself. And it was almost this thing of, you're going to be all right. You're going to be just fine. So yeah, I can completely see where that makes total sense.
So I want to go into a little bit of a deep dive in terms of ADHD.
Yeah.
So for people listening or watching your story here, and they're like, I may have ADHD, or I may know someone who has ADHD. It may not be a bad thing, but I really want to deal with it to be able to support myself. Like, what were some of the signs? And then what was the process of, did you just go to your GP and your doctors and go through that? Or did you have to get a private person? How did that whole work?
Yeah. So yeah, it's really good questions, because so many people are currently battling with it. So the first thing I want to address is that there's so much media and lots of kind of talk around, and I've got clients who've said that even GPs have said it to them of, everybody's a little bit ADHD. So first of all, ADHD is like a category of mind. It's a different way of thinking. There's research to show that physically the brain works differently, never mind anything else. The problem that we're having and why ADHD causes so much noise is because actually we don't 100% know what it is. There's lots of different theories, lots of different research, but we don't completely know. And as humans, we like to know, which is why there's lots of like, what is it, what isn't it, all that kind of stuff. So I've always like known a few things about myself before you could even like put a label on it, if you like. And if I use the example of the timesheets, the reason why I was finding that so hard is because no matter how hard I tried, it's not that I didn't want to do that task. I knew I needed to do it. I knew it was important. My brain just physically wouldn't let me. It would find a million other things to do, but this timesheet. And then on top of that, like I said, some things just took me way less time. But what I was realizing was that, say my boss gave me something and was like, I think this is going to take you all day. Even if I got it done, like they call it hyperfocus for ADHD, even if I got it done in like 2 hours, I was too scared to then go say to my boss, I'm done, because I knew that obviously they'd then give me more work to do. And in those 2 hours, I had just worked so hard that I couldn't physically do any more work. Like my brain was like, no more, you're done. You're literally done. And I just remember thinking, yeah, but you're supposed to just work a 9 to 5. And I remember looking at my housemate during the pandemic, and we're both working from home, and she didn't particularly like her job at the time, and she'd just do it. And I remember saying to her, like, how are you just do it? You're just sitting down and doing it. And she was just like, I have to, it's my job, I get paid to. And for whatever reason, I just couldn't connect the dots. On top of that, I am a proper chatty, I am a massive daydreamer. I'd always been told that I had lots of really good ideas. And I was told I had really good ideas, but I used to kind of be just like, well, yeah, like I didn't realize that people were saying to you, like, look, you're having ideas like nobody else in this room is having. I probably was quite bashful about it. And also there was a small part of me that was like, are we not all just having the same idea? Like it seemed really straightforward to me. Anyways, ADHD normally shows up with the bits that you struggle with, because we work in a society and we go through an education system that is not set up for the ADHD brain. So that's why it comes up as a struggle. And I always say, like, I wish part of the assessment was assessing your strengths as well, because some gorgeous strengths with ADHD. But we live in the world we live in. So it started with the timesheet thing, and then I started diving in and doing all this research, and I'd always read loads about like the theory around like what attachment style you have. And I was like, oh, I've got an anxious attachment. And then I started reading about this thing called RSD, which is rejection sensitivity dysphoria. And they think 100% of people with ADHD have it. And it's basically that if you perceive any kind of rejection, it's almost like painful. So there's me thinking I'm just quite anxiously attached because of past experiences. And then finding out, well, actually, no, you feel rejection on like a whole nother level. So when I actually went to be assessed, the area that I lived in at the time, I was told that I would be waiting about 4 years to get diagnosed. And as much as I laugh and joke and stuff, I couldn't wait. I was at crisis point. And I say to my clients now, you don't really need a diagnosis because it doesn't cure it. It just tells you what you already knew. But I didn't have access to all the communities that I do now. I felt very alone. I told nobody, not even my parents, not my best friends, nothing. So I went private, which cost me about 500-600 quid 2 years ago, and would now probably cost you over £1,000, unfortunately. But I had to know. And what I didn't plan for was that I was going to have to tell my parents, because when you're diagnosed as an adult, they still use information of when you were a child. So when they assess a child, they're looking at them in school, they're asking their teachers, their parents. When you're an adult, I was saying to my parents, can you please remember what I was like 25 years ago? And they obliged, and they filled in the assessments and stuff. But the issue we're having is that adults haven't been able to be diagnosed with ADHD. It only started in 2008, which is not that long ago. And I did a video on it that, people are like, oh, why are all these people suddenly being diagnosed? Especially women, because for a short time they thought it was just men. And it's one, it's because of TikTok and it's because of the pandemic. So during the pandemic, obviously we all went to social media, right? Because other than joining a Zoom disco on a Friday or a quiz, there wasn't that much else to do.
Which I quite enjoyed, the quizzes.
Oh yeah, me too.
Yeah, didn't get the opportunity, I didn't get invited to a Zoom disco. Man, I'm gutted. You're telling me about these now.
I'll talk to you about it afterwards, yeah. But yeah, we all went to social media, right? And everybody's all of a sudden kind of getting used to TikToks, and then Reels becomes a thing and whatever. And all of this, people are just starting to talk about themselves because, why not? And people with ADHD are starting to talk about themselves. So there's all these people watching these videos like, holy fuck, oh my God, that's me, they're talking about me. So what happened during the pandemic is we're all basically self-diagnosing. And bear in mind that at the time, you don't go see your GP, obviously, because they're on the front line and blah, 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 and doing what they had to do. So then we come out of the pandemic, and all of a sudden, all these a lot of women are going to their GP and basically saying, hi, I'd like to understand how I can be diagnosed with ADHD. Forgetting that these GPs have not been on TikTok the whole time, and the research is not flowing down to general practitioners as quick as we think it does. So you've got all these GPs like, what the hell's going on? Getting completely overflowed with applications. So that's when the private assessments come in, which obviously are a lot quicker. So you still can be diagnosed via the NHS. In fact, I'd still encourage you to go speak to your GP and stuff. Unfortunately, it is a little bit of a, who do you get? I've had clients who their GPs have just kind of laughed at them and said, yeah, okay. And I think on average, you're an adult woman with ADHD, on average, will be diagnosed with about 4 other things before ADHD. So they'll be misdiagnosed with anxiety, depression, bipolar. They might be, I read about a girl who was like, I've self-medicated all through my 20s with alcohol because it's what chills me out because I'm up here. Then finding out that she's got ADHD, but first she was told that she was an alcoholic. So it's all these different things, and there's a big long battle ahead of us. I hope not a battle, but there's a big long journey ahead of it, but there are some incredible communities jumping up. But yeah, just because I was quite open on my social media about being diagnosed with ADHD, through the Joy Project, I don't know how it happened, but I started attracting clients who either already knew they had ADHD, and they're coming to me for life coaching, right? But they already knew they had ADHD, or they suspected it, or there were even some where they didn't know, but I knew, I could tell. Kind of.
You were like, just hinting along that, right?
Literally, yeah. So, but the way I had been trained, I'd had fantastic training, but it just wasn't working. People with ADHD, as you can tell, can talk for hours and hours. Well, I've got 60 minutes with you and I haven't got a word in edgeways. I was like, there's got to be a different way. So I actually then retrained up as an ADHD coach as well, worked with an incredible company. And I now do both. So I do life coaching and I do ADHD coaching. And the coaching is just one small part of what we call like your ADHD toolbox. So you can go on medication. That's usually the first thing that you'll be like asked, do you want to go on medication? I personally chose not to. I kind of figured that I'd got this far. I'd done 30 years without it. So, but yeah, as ADHD coaching, people try herbal medicines, movement, exercise, cold water exposure. There's just a whole host of things, but it's super hard because you've spent however long thinking you're weird and the odd one out. Then you are almost, validated that actually your brain just works differently. So then you start going through almost like the change curve. You go through the grief curve of, oh my gosh, if only I'd known. And then it's like, well, what do I do about it? And then, there's all these different things that you can do about it. So it's, there's a reason why it's such a big deal. There's there's lots of people that will say like it's not real, or the most recent one is people are getting diagnosed because it's fashionable. And I think I said in a post the other day, if ADHD is fashionable, that is the first time in my life that I have been on trend, right? And a neurotypical person I would invite, step into my head for 10 minutes and you will go kicking and screaming because it's full on up there. So yeah, there's loads I could talk about with it, but it's not going anywhere. I would say there's still so many conversations to be had about it.
So Meg, where we're at now, and everything that you've talked about ADHD, and I think it's really important. There's so much I wish this was like a 6-hour podcast. We could go into relationships. We've not even talked about the outdoors and how important that is.
Oh my God,
and like loads of things we could have jumped into. So Meg and I, we know each other because of Mel, my partner, and we met on when we went on that walk.
On a hike, yeah.
We went on a hike in the Lake District, and yeah, so essentially that's how we met each other. But I kind of want to. We'll have to do episode 2 some other time, and it's just going to be a completely different topic or whatever it is. But essentially, I want to talk to you just really quickly about what's the future. How far in advance do you look with your life?
Not very far. Not very far at all. I always thought, what's your 5-year plan? What's your 10-year plan? And life surprises me every month, pretty much. A great example, I started this year, I was going into like 3rd or 4th year single, maybe even been 5th year potentially. And I remember starting this year thinking, I'm so happy on my own. Like I'm so happy solo, single, I feel so whole. And then I met my partner in February. And we moved in together like September 2023.
You told me you had a 5-year plan
Literally,
to be another single.
And that's what I mean. And I just, especially with the Joy Project as well, right? Like I was thinking this when I was coming in to do the recording today. I bought a jacket, this like vintage shop in back home, and I was chatting to the guy and he said, so what do you do? And I said, I run my own business. And he didn't realise, but in my head I was like, oh, like it really, and I'm walking to the train station afterwards and it really choked me up because I was like, I'm running my own business. And I always think of Meg 5 years ago, Meg just before the pandemic, Meg at 27, 28, however old I was. And I just always want to say to her, like, just hold on. It's going to be twisty turny, but please just hold on. So I have every belief that the future is going to be great and, you know, exciting and adventurous and peaceful and calm and all these different things. And the belief literally comes from because I'll create it, if you like. And I'm very open to just see what happens. Because in my experience, the minute you start to control everything, you just close it all right down. Don't get me wrong, I have to remind myself to do that now and again. But yeah, who knows? Literally, who knows? ...
I love it. So cool. So, like, how do people find out about you? Like, how if they're interested in your story, on what you do, how do people get hold of you?
Like, definitely Instagram. I dabble in like social media strategy stuff as well. So I love Instagram. Spend a lot of time on there. So yeah, so I'm at the Joy Project Coach. Always up for a chat in the DMs, and I share more on there, even if it's just to have a look through the grid and just learn something. I don't hold back very much. There's always something you can learn, I think. But yes, always up for a chat with people as well.
Amazing. So before we jump into the quick fire questions, when you're not really going to like me because I'm just going to be firing things at you, and it's just going to be so much fun. I'm going to love it. But before we get into that, I want to say thank you.
It's okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
But to share your story, to be vulnerable, to be honest, and to just do that on a consistent basis. I'm not just talking about here. You do that on a day-to-day basis, and you have done for like years now. Like, and to become an entrepreneur and to go and back it, essentially you're backing yourself.
Yeah.
Like, that takes courage.
Yeah.
And courage is usually talked about when we go onto the battlefields or all that kind of stuff, but we don't talk about it very, very often in everyday life, and you've been super courageous. So thank you for being so courageous and inspiring so many people, and your real life as well.
Yeah.
Real life stories to encourage real life change. That's what Tales to Inspire is. And that is what Meg Holloway is as well, right?
Oh, yeah, you're giving me goosebumps there. But yeah, I'd never thought of myself as courageous, but if I can be anybody can be, is what I'd say.
I love that. Meg, if you were to give your 21-year-old self one piece of advice, what would it be and why?
Drop the rope.
Drop the rope. Mm-hmm. I love that, all right? I'm not going to ask anything.
Let it go.
Let it go.
Just let it go. Drop the rope.
How much of where you're at right now is due to luck, and how much of it is due to hard work?
Ooh, 75% hard work, 25% luck.
Okay. When do you feel most connected to you?
On top of a mountain or in a dance studio.
I love it. If there was a government rule, it was the Meg Holloway rule, and it was one rule, and it would be applied to the whole of the government, what would it be and why?
Think of other people before yourself.
I love that. What do you want to do more of?
Work with schools, for sure. Work with teenagers specifically. For everything I've said, there is stuff that they could be learning now, and then they won't end up in the pickle that millennials find themselves in.
So true. Okay, I love that. And what do you want to do less of?
Probably sat at my desk. I'm a one-man band, so I do literally everything to do with the Joy Project. So I don't want to be sedentary. I want to move more. So yeah, sit at my desk less.
Right, so the final two questions that I ask every Tales to Inspire guest.
Yeah.
So, Meg Holloway, what is your definition of the word inspire?
To inspire is to be living a life where people think that's possible for me. You're a few steps ahead, but maybe I could get there too.
I love that. And if you're going to look back on your life, say you've made it to 104 years old, you know, you've made it past that huge stepping stone, and you're looking back, what is the biggest impact or proudest achievement you want to have achieved during your lifetime?
Ooh, I was thinking about this the other day because I've been thinking a lot about like mission and what I want to leave behind and stuff, and it's not just to help people, it's to liberate people. I don't just want to be a helper. I want to, I guess, help liberate them to unlock that next level of their life.
Just that, like, a little bit deeper than
Yeah.
helping can be very surface level sometimes.
Yeah.
But being that extra bit, so it's not just a one-time connection. It's more of a, you know, I'm going to be there and help you. Is it more on the side of it, teach a man to fish kind of thing?
So I always say with my coaching, my only job, the only job I have when I coach people is to hold them up here, like literally their highest self. And I see it really quickly in people. And my job, my only job, hold them up here and then help them see that too.
I love that. Meg, thank you so much for being on the Tip.
Thank you for having me.
That's so cool.
Thank you for watching today's episode. If you enjoyed today's episode, then please leave a comment in the comment section below, and we cannot wait to see you for our next episode.